Hey everybody, it's Chef LaChelle here. Welcome to my kitchen and thank you for joining me. I am here just starting off some of the first few steps in my garden gumbo recipe. If you've had my vegan gumbo recipe, this is very close to that, but I'm changing it a little bit. I want to amplify the flavors even more and also adding in some new ingredients. And the way I'm amplifying those flavors is by changing my cooking process a little bit, so I'll talk to you about that. And then adding in a couple more ingredients and some more flavors and spices into the dish. So the first thing I actually did was prepped all my ingredients because there's a lot of vegetables and aromatics in the gumbo. I actually cut up onions, garlic, peppers, celery, carrots, mushrooms, tomatoes, and all of those scraps I put into a pot and basically have been simmering that for a while. I'm just going to turn it off because it's pretty much done. You don't have to cook vegetable stock for hours. I like to kind of simmer it for a while until the vegetables are really soft and I've drawn out all of those flavors, and then I'm just gonna kind of let it steep there. And then I'll strain it and use it for the stock in our garden gumbo. And then I have all my prepped ingredients. You can't see it, but my other counter is full of prep, all the prep. And so I'm cooking my onions down. And I cook those down and it smells really amazing in here. I just added in some garlic in here as well. And I sweated the onions, so that's really cooking them really slow so the moisture kind of draws out. I put a little salt to really draw the moisture out of the onions. And I cooked those down for maybe 5 or 10 minutes. And then I added in the garlic. And so I'm pretty much want to toast the garlic now, so I'm kind of turning it back up to about medium, toasting that garlic a little bit to develop that flavor. So really want to layer the flavor so you can really taste all of that depth of flavor when you take a bite of this gumbo. Mushrooms and tomatoes have natural umami, natural basically glutamate. Some people, might shun like MSG or monosodium glutamate, but it's actually naturally occurring in a lot of foods, and especially mushrooms, tomatoes, cheeses, meaty things. But again, this is plant-based, so we really want to get as much umami and delicious flavor into the dish. So we've got mushrooms in it, we've got tomatoes in it, we got fresh tomatoes and fire roasted. And I also have a little soy sauce in this recipe because I'm trying to pack the umami in. All right, this is not traditionally how I've ever done gumbo. I've done this maybe once before where I cooked the aromatics, but normally what you do when you make gumbo is you make a roux. Well, some people do it. Listen, there's many ways to make gumbo as there are people that make them, and everybody's very serious about their way. There's different ways that people thicken them, and that really is kind of the beauty of the dish, is that it's a melting pot dish. It's all kinds of cultures and cooking techniques and diversity represented, cultural diversity represented in the dish and in the ingredients in the dish, right? It comes out of Louisiana, kind of Creole, Cajun cooking, and in that is a lot of French, African, and indigenous influences. When you think of the ways that you would thicken gumbo, there's 3 different ways. You either do a roux, or you can do either or all of these, which I do all of them. A roux is equal parts flour and fat. And so you can, make a roux just by mixing flour and fat together. Usually, when people make a roux, they're using butter and flour, or oil and flour. I'm using oil and flour also, but I am making this actually to be gluten-free and adding in a really great flour that is packed with protein, which is chickpea flour. Packed with protein and flavor, and actually has its own umami also going on. I think. I just prescribe that. But anyway, I'm adding in the mushrooms. Now the mushrooms gonna have moisture in them, so they're adding moisture to the pan, but that's fine. Again, I want to cook this down until the moisture is cooked out of the mushrooms. The ways that we're thinking gumbo, the roux situation. Chickpeas, magical. You might have seen me talk about chickpeas. Maybe, hopefully, you have. So much beauty in the chickpea. I'm using it. It is literally just ground down chickpea, or garbanzo beans. And we're gonna make the roux with that. And so normally when you're making your roux, you're going to start, I like making roux in a cast iron pan. And I'm gonna use a couple different pots for this dish. I really don't like to use too many pots in a dish, but because I like to make my roux and I like to cook down a lot of things in cast iron, but I don't like to use tomato in cast iron, so I'm going to be moving over to, and obviously our gumbo is not going to fit in this dish, so I'm going to be moving over to the big soup pot once we move to that stage in the cooking. But for the cooking down of the veggies and aromatics, as well as for making the roux, I like to use a cast iron skillet. And usually you're going to make your roux. It's literally is a roux as soon as you mix the flour with the fat, it's a roux. But for gumbo, you want to toast the roux. You want to cook it kind of low and slow. Some people, there's, like I said, there's so many different ways to cook gumbo and even roux. Some people cook it in the oven. I've done that. It takes a long time, but it does make a very beautiful and more consistent roux, and your likelihood of scorching it is much lower. But you can also make it right on the stove top. Some people do it at a high heat really fast and they're really whisking it. Some people do it at a lower heat and it takes them a long time and they're whisking it for like 20 minutes. We're gonna try to not go too slow with it because this is already a lot of steps. But usually you don't start by cooking down your aromatics. You start by making your roux and then you add your trinity into the roux. Your trinity is only 3 things, right? Trinity. It's usually half of it is onion and then a quarter of it is green pepper and the other quarter is celery. That's the traditional Louisiana, Creole Cajun trinity. However, I'm not doing a trinity per se. I'm doing like a multicultural nation. I'm doing a rainbow of aromatics and vegetables. And instead of making my roux and then adding just the raw vegetables and kind of cooking them in the roux, I'm cooking down the onions and the garlic and the mushrooms to add in to really just get, the flavor development that you get when you cook down onions first before you add anything else to them is just something to me that's just a beautiful, the beauty of simplicity. I only talked about the one way so far of thickening a roux, and I said there were 3. Thickening a roux, thickening a gumbo, but I said there were 3, and so the second one, so there's the roux, and then you can also do okra. So okra, literally, me and gumbo have a synonymous meaning in African cultures that actually brought gumbo over during the transatlantic slave trade. A lot of African foodways and cooking styles, seasonings, and even some ingredients, gumbo, black-eyed pea, spices, lemons, limes, stuff like that came from Africa. And all of that didn't happen during the transatlantic slave trade. Like, people have been mixing up ingredients and all that stuff for a really long time. I'm gonna go ahead and add all this stuff in because we got quite a bit we want to cook down, and I'm going to increase my heat because I'm adding a lot in, and it all has a lot of moisture, so it won't burn. It'll actually speed up the process of kind of cooking these veggies a little bit. I'm not going to cook them too much. I don't want them to disappear necessarily in the dish, but again, I want to develop the flavors. Okra, indigenous to Africa, one of my favorite vegetables. A lot of people don't like it because they say it's too slimy and they don't like the texture. I love the texture. And it's really highly nutritious. It's actually really good for detoxing your body. It pulls a lot of anything that's mucilaginous like that, you know, slimy, so to speak. It's actually really good for you. I did a dish with Chef Pierre Chiam, who is a Senegalese chef, and he wrote a book called Yolele, which is basically featuring a lot of the African ancestral dishes to a lot of, you know, what we think of as soul food. Soupy Kanja Royale. So good. It has dried shrimp, dried oysters, beef shoulders, mutton feet. We couldn't find mutton feet, so that didn't happen. I think I did something else to replace that. They had like smoked fish, onions, bay leaves, shrimp, crab, fish stock or bouillon, habanero, okra, fish sauce, black pepper, and it's served over rice. If that ain't gumbo, okay, it's gumbo. But it's called Soupy Kanja Royale. Okay, check it out. It's like the grandmother of gumbo. Then the third way, or the other way that people have made gumbo, and I don't know what the, you know, maybe some of my indigenous friends might know, like what is the indigenous kind of gumbo. But I know like southern indigenous, we're in the north now, so I know there's a difference in the cultures between southern and northern indigenous people. But I don't know what the dish is, but I know that the thickening agent that they use was called gumbo filet. And it's literally ground down sassafras, which is like a leaf, an herb, a plant, basically. And this is just a store-bought version of it. Actually kind of not like that great of a version of it, but you can kind of see. But it's sassafras. It has a really nice aroma to it, herby. And that can be, and is used to thicken gumbo as well. I was always told that you're supposed to use it at the end and not necessarily cook it into the gumbo, but I've seen recipes that do cook it into the gumbo. It does, you can definitely, there's a unique flavor that it adds to the gumbo. I'm not pulling any punches. I'm coming with all of the flavors that we possibly can. So I'm going to take these veggies out of here and lift this up and put them in my bowl. And we don't want to have any of this stuff left in the pan because I don't want it to burn when I'm making the roux. But I also don't necessarily want to like wash the pan because I like that. So whenever you cook stuff and you have that, especially when you cook meats, but you know, anything you cook and there's like that residue left in the bottom of the pan, that's where all the flavor is. We call that the fond. That's actually the basis of making really great stocks and sauces. For the roux, it's equal parts fat, which is our oil, to flour. I have chickpea flour here. I'm gonna just whisk it in. Now equal parts would be by weight. I just did 2 cups of oil, and I'm going to, and I have some backup flour, but I'm just gonna add the flour until I get the texture that I want. And let me mix this in, kind of gradually, carefully. And this oil is going to start to get hot, so we don't want to be too jerky with it. But it's a nice consistency that I want, that I'm looking for. You really want like kind of a smooth peanut butter texture. And depending on the viscosity, the liquidiness of your liquid, of your fat, and the like dryness and flouriness of your flour, the ratios are going to be different. So that's why I like to add in the fat first and then gradually add it. See, I'm already out of flour and I don't think that's enough. So, and I'm out of chickpea flour, but I have some gluten-free flour. So I'm gonna add that into supplement. I also have some black-eyed pea flour because you guys have seen me use that. But I haven't used that in the gumbo yet. Yeah, I didn't use that one time. Let me go with this one time. No, I didn't use it. Because when you use black-eyed pea flour, although that would be fabulous, black-eyed peas in the gumbo, in the flour, in the roux, right? Oh my God, that makes me feel good inside. Just to pay homage to, you know, the ingredient. I like the black-eyed pea. Anyway, so I don't use it in here because the black-eyed pea flour, usually you're supposed to, what we call, soak it for 2 hours because it's a little bit different as a bean, and it needs to kind of sit and open up in the moisture. So if I'm going to use black-eyed pea flour, whatever I'm going to use it in, I make it the dough 2 hours in advance and let it sit at least 2 hours in advance. Okay, so grapeseed oil has a really high smoke point, so it's really good for frying, and it also takes a lot more flour to get it to the consistency we want it to get to. So I'm still adding more flour. So now we're probably more closer to 4 cups of flour at this point. So it's like 2 cups of oil, 4 cups of flour. I think this is the perfect texture that I'm looking for though. I think I can even add the rest of that in. Perfect. Cooking is a lot about instincts, right? Right? So I'm looking at it visually. It's not looking how I want. I can make adjustments. Baking, on the other hand, it's instinctual, but it's different. You can't just look at it and start putting stuff in the cake batter when it's cooking in the oven. You can do that before it goes in and do as best you can to look at it and make sure before, but all right, so now it's a really great consistency. I wish I could take it off of the tripod, then I would mess all of my whole camera up, and because this is so hot, I'm not taking it off the stove to show it to you, but it looks great. And it's bubbling now. When it's bubbling, it's hot. I'm not trying to get, you know, hot with this, and the more it goes, the hotter it's gonna get. So the best is to keep stirring it as much as possible. And this gluten-free flour, I will admit, it takes longer to brown than regular AP flour does. It's actually already brown, but it takes longer to get the caramelization that you're looking for. We've got the vegetable stock that still needs to be strained. We had all our scraps from onions, garlic, mushrooms, peppers, green peppers, celery, carrots. Got our other veggies going that we did earlier. So our aromatics, our onions, garlic, mushrooms, and then our peppers, green peppers, and our celery and carrots all kind of cooked down in there. We've got cauliflower coming in later with the okra. We just use frozen okra, so I just got it sitting there. And frozen corn this time because, you know, it's not really in season anymore. Tomatoes fresh. I also did a can of fire roasted tomatoes. I like the flavor that they bring. Putting in a little bit of Marla's hot sauce. You know Marla from Marla's Caribbean Cuisine. The recipe calls for hot sauce, and I just happen to have a little bit of hers. Soy sauce and bay leaves. And then we've got our salt and pepper and our seasoning mix. You don't forget about your roux now. Don't just be walking away. Look, fortunately, we don't have the heat up very high. We only have it on medium right now. And so that's all we want, because if we burn this, then we got to start all the way over, because there is nobody that wants burnt gumbo or burnt tasting gumbo. So we got to make sure we're doing it right. So I'll be back with you in a second once we get this roux to the right color. and consistency that we're looking for. Okay, so I went ahead and added in the vegetables, and I turned the heat off a few minutes before that, kept stirring, and then now I've added in our cooked vegetables, which was our onions, garlic, mushrooms, celery, green peppers, and carrots. And now it's just bubbling away. I'm gonna just let this cool. Then I'm gonna put you back in the tripod. I strained our vegetable stock also. There it is. Garden gumbo. I like using frozen vegetables sometimes because they're frozen at their peak, you know, quality. And so sometimes if things aren't in season, they're a good alternative and they're not canned. And if you're gonna cook them, then it can work out. We got the cauliflower in there. You see all the different vegetables. I'm gonna give it a taste test. I did add some other seasonings, including liquid smoke, which is a new ingredient that I had not used before in my vegan gumbo. Just use a really tiny bit, like a teaspoon. But I can't flip the camera right now, but yum.